Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Feast of Santa Chiara, or as we say in America, Saint Clare of Assisi. Pray for us, a very important saint in relationship to Saint Francis of Assisi, of course, but also in relationship to this very network, EWTN. Saint Clare, with the help of Saint Francis, founded the Poor Clares, of course, of which Mother Angelica, our foundress, was a very powerful member within. And thanks be to God for her strength and offering up her suffering. She started this network so many years ago. By the way, we're celebrating a big anniversary this week. We've got some wonderful guests that'll be joining us. More on that a little bit later. But if you ever go to Hansville, and we talk about that quite a bit, go to the beautiful shrine in Hansville, you'll see how familiar it is. And if you have not been to Assisi, you will feel like you're going to Assisi because it will remind you so much if you just look at the pictures, for example. It's just beautiful. So there's a lot of St. Francis and St. Clare running through our network, according to the spirituality. So it's a beautiful thing. St. Clare, by the way, first heard Francis speak when she was a teenager. He was 11 years older than she was, and she said, "This is it. This is my life. I have to follow this man who's following Christ and teaching me so much more about my faith." Now, it wasn't easy for her. She was a member of a very prominent, well-to-do family. They wanted her to marry into another prominent family, and oh boy, they were not exactly happy when she decided to run off and start the Poor Clares and live a life of austerity and to help serve the poor along with St. Francis of Assisi. So many, many places, and we'll talk about this in 2 cents today in a little bit more detail tomorrow, also about Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, dedicated to the life and the places of interest in St. Clare of Assisi's lifetime. And again, she was 11 years younger than St. Francis of Assisi. He actually conferred the habit onto her at Santa Maria dell'Angeli, which is where the Portiuncula, or Little Portion Church, is located, which is below the actual city of Assisi, below Mount Subasio. Okay, more on that in the second hour. Very excited with our guest lineup today. It's awesome, as it always is. Very special guests this morning. Right out of the gate after the news and weather, we have our very own Father Wade Menezes, and we're going to be talking about his brand new EWTN podcast, Stand Firm and Be Strong, a newly launched podcast, daily podcast from the network, and it's a short, powerful spiritual guide for men in hopes of getting them to deepen their Catholic faith, directly inspired by his beautiful 2024 devotional book, Stand Firm, Be Strong, a men's Catholic daily devotional of Scripture and Saints. So we'll talk to Father Wade. That's coming up at about 15 minutes past the hour. The bottom of the hour, Shaun McAfee is going to be joining us about children's books, more particularly looking at a beautiful book, St. Dominic and the Rosary. This is one amazing month of saints. We just had St. Dominic's feast day on Saturday. Yesterday, St. Lawrence. Today, St. Clare. And of course, this is Ferragosto month, as we say in Italy, the month of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So it's a big month for saints and special events in the church. And Shaun will be along to talk about the importance of providing great materials for our families and young people. And then it's a Tuesday, so that means we will check in with the educational news, of course, with Kelly Salomon and the Newman Guide news segment that will begin at 39 minutes past the hour. Second hour, we are going to be spending 2 segments with Carolyn Clicka. She's been with us before, and she started a new ministry based on her own experience and pain called Build a New Life, and it's a workshop. She's a certified divorce healing coach, and there's great news about Catholic parishes across North America launching a new movement of accompaniment for divorced, separated couples or couples in marital crisis. So we'll talk with her about this, and if you're looking for information or maybe how to get something started at your parish, she can help you do that. So that is a lineup for this morning, as we say, 4 minutes past the hour already. Let's take a look at the weather. They're talking about severe thunderstorms, damaging wind gusts possible from the mid-Mississippi Valley into parts of the Ohio Valley and central Appalachians. Heavy rain associated with the storms that may lead to considerable flash and urban flooding, and that's impacting across portions of the Ohio Valley. And then we also have, don't forget, we are still in the dog days of summer, midsummer heat persisting from the Central Plains to the southeast. Again, 4 minutes past the hour on this Tuesday, Feast of Saint Clare of Assisi. We'll talk more about her in the next hour in 2 cents. Right now, though, busy news morning as well. Never a dull moment. Let's see what's happening in the news on a Tuesday here on EWTN. EWTN. EWTNnews.com has a full report on this, but this is just, I don't know what to say. Well, read it for yourself and listen closely. This is a very, very important but tragic thing that happened recently in the state of Massachusetts. A Democratic governor there, Maura Healey, signing a bill allowing abortion at any point in pregnancy in that state, making Massachusetts the 11th state to impose no limits on abortion. The legislation was signed this week, removing all of the state's restrictions on abortion after 24 weeks. An elective late-term abortion, EWTNnews.com explains, may be done based upon the professional judgment of the physician performing it. Meanwhile, Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of SBA Pro-Life America, saying in a written statement, it should shock the conscience that tens of thousands of unborn Americans are barbarically dismembered limb by limb and torn apart every single year. Sadly, that number will only increase with Governor Healey's approval on the abortion up until birth bill. Now, under the previous statute, state law allowed abortion during the first 24 weeks of pregnancy if a physician said it was necessary to preserve the life, physical, or mental health of the woman because of a lethal fetal anomaly or diagnosis, or because the fetus wouldn't likely survive outside the uterus. Now, according to a 2024 study from the Charlotte Lozier Institute, 46 of 50 countries in Europe limit abortion after 15 weeks, a point by which the baby feels pain. The Institute also found that over 60,000 abortions occur after 15 weeks each year. Dr. Anthony Fauci privately raised concerns that the COVID-19 vaccine could theoretically be linked to miscarriages in expectant mothers, despite having publicly insisted there were no red flags for pregnant women. In a January 25, 2021 text exchange with then Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky and Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, they have been discussing whether the vaccine posed any risk to women who followed the two-shot regimen earlier or later in their pregnancies. Yet days later, on February 3rd, Fauci said during a Q&A session, a live stream with the Journal of the American Medical Association, that the FDA found thus far, and we have to be careful, but thus far, no red flags about pregnant women. The messages released by Senators Rand Paul of Kentucky and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, taken from more than 34,000 texts and 522 voice messages obtained by the Senate Homeland Security Committee last week from Fauci's government-issued cell phone. Senator Johnson requesting transcribed interviews with Fauci and other Food and Drug Administration officials as part of his investigation into the government's response to the pandemic. The newly released messages come after Fauci appearing last week before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, or actually last month. Another major story we're following for you today, the death toll has now risen to more than 130 after a magnitude 7.4 earthquake striking Colombia yesterday. In San Jose, California, restaurant owner John Benincourt says he's relieved his family back home is okay, but very worried for those who still can't contact loved ones in Colombia.
In one moment, everything down, In one moment, in 3 seconds, your life, the people, family, babies.
Rescue efforts are underway to find survivors who may be trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings. The epicenter of the quake was located some 200 miles west of the capital city of Bogota. Reports it could be felt in parts of Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the Trump administration is closely monitoring the situation there. And again, a little more than a month after that massive earthquake devastated Venezuela, the earthquake that rocked Colombia is causing what appears to be significant damage. Doral-based Global Empowerment Mission COO Jeff Popovich from Florida is already jumping into action.
Right now we're sending our team into Colombia to assess the situation and see if there's a need for additional aid, our family necessity kits or anything that's needed.
He says it's too early right now to know if they'll need additional volunteer shifts at their Florida warehouse to help pack supplies for Colombia. The team members are still in Venezuela, however. President Trump says Iran should pay damages for the harm that regime has inflicted on the world for the past 50 years. The president was asked about Iran's latest demands yesterday as negotiations play out with the U.S.
They asked for money for the damage that we've done. And I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed.
President Trump also saying yesterday the U.S. Navy now has control over the Strait of Hormuz.
We have a blockade that's been infallible. It's a steel wall, and we let people in that we want to let in, and those people come in, and they've been coming in and they're going out, so it's actually open now.
Over the weekend, Iran had a number of demands to the U.S., including that the U.S. must completely compensate Iran for damages from the 5-month-long war, and Trump again telling White House reporters he thinks Iran should pay for all of the people that they've killed or hurt over the last several decades. And the president is signing an executive order focusing on childhood vaccine schedules. Speaking from the White House, the president saying the order would split the childhood MMR vaccine into 3 shots.
Effective immediately, my administration is recognizing gold standard childhood vaccine recommendations for only 11 core vaccinations against the most serious and dangerous diseases, along with the MMR, which hopefully will be split up.
The order would also push for all childhood immunizations to be administered at separate medical visits. Again, instead of one visit, COVID-19 and influenza vaccines are no longer being recommended for all young children. The president mentioned the growing rates of autism in the country, and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. indicating more research is underway to see if there is a connection between autism and increased vaccines or another environmental exposure. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also moving to officially define what makes certain foods ultra-processed. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing yesterday the federal government's first proposed definition of ultra-processed foods will be revealed very soon.
The first time we will have a consistent federal framework to study these foods, to understand their effects on human health, and to build a stronger and lasting nutrition policy.
In his announcement, Kennedy said nearly 60% of the American diet is made up of ultra-processed foods, and childhood obesity now affects more than 1 in 5 American children. He also announced another proposal that requires manufacturers to notify the FDA when concluding that a substance added to human or animal food is generally recognized as safe, known as GRAS or GRAS. Mark Mayfield tells us Todd Blanche has now been sworn in as the next Attorney General.
The ceremony took place in the Oval Office on Monday. The Senate confirmed Blanche on Saturday after weeks of debate with a handful of Republicans in opposition. The vote was 50-49, with Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska joining Democrats in opposition. Some Republicans expressed concerns about Blanche having a possible conflict of interest because he was President Trump's former personal attorney and because he helped create Trump's now rescinded $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And there's a full slate of primary elections today. Voters heading to the polls in Alabama, Connecticut, Minnesota, Vermont, Wisconsin, and in a South Carolina race where there's a special Senate primary. This after Senator Lindsey Graham's sudden death. The governor appointed his sister, Darlene Graham, to serve out the remainder of his term, and she's running for his full term Tuesday in a crowded Republican field. And meanwhile, in Wisconsin, all eyes are on the Democratic primary race for governor, where a Democratic socialist, Francesca Hahn, has increased in the polls. We'll be right back on a Tuesday. Saint Clare of Assisi, pray for us. All right, here we go. Another great opportunity to grow in your faith, especially for the guys out there. A beautiful new podcast from our dear friend and fellow host, Father Wade Menezes. His EWTN podcast is called Stand Firm, Be Strong. And of course, it is a newly launched podcast, daily podcast, designed as a short, powerful spiritual guide based on his beautiful book, his devotional book from 2024, Stand Firm, Be Strong, a men's Catholic daily devotional of Scripture and Saints. Father, first, congrats on the podcast and welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Teresa. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation to come on.
This is exciting, so let's talk about it. Give us the housekeeping details first so people know where to listen.
Okay, great. So we launched the Stand Firm, Be Strong podcast a week ago yesterday on Monday, August 3rd. A new podcast is being posted every single day, uploaded every single day at EWTN.com, which doubles as EWTN Plus, a completely free platform. Currently, if you go to EWTN.com at the homepage, what's also known as the front page, the first page that comes up when you go to EWTN.com, you have your horizontal rows of different categories. Currently, the Stand Firm, Be Strong podcast is appearing on 3 of those: the Spotlight row, the podcast row, and also the spiritual growth row. And for the book itself, which has inspired the podcast, which came out just under 2 years ago in November 2024, and you had me on back then.
Yep, I remember that.
To help talk about the book, is available from EWTNRC.com. That stands for Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, and also available from FathersOfMercy.com. So 2 opportunities for the book. But yes, the podcast has been inspired by the book. The podcast itself grew out of the popularity of the men's devotional book of the same exact title, as I said earlier. And each day of the podcast has a different spiritual or temporal, secular topic, that is followed by 3 components: a scripture quote, a saint quote, and a short meditation written by me. The title, Stand Firm, Be Strong, comes from 1 Corinthians 16:13, wherein we read, "Be watchful, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong."
What do you think, Father, as a priest, but as a retreat leader and as a talk show host in your own right, what do you think is really perplexing for men these days, for Catholic men trying to be good fathers, be good husbands? Maybe they're single, not yet married, just trying to be strong in their faith. And we were talking during the break, the craziness of this world right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it is important when we talk about men and masculinity in this modern day and age, 26 years into the third millennium, to talk about all states in life: the singles, the marrieds, widowers, consecrated religious men of a religious order, or consecrated diocesan priests, and even bishops. And interestingly enough, in the introduction of the book and also in the promotion of the podcast, I make it clear that both the book and the podcast are meant for men of all states in life, because the culture is very challenging today. To get back to your question, and one of the things that inspired me to do the book just over a year and a half ago was the fact that I personally believe that in our Universal Catholic Library, we greatly lacked in the genre of daily devotional for men, for males. We had it for females, we have it for young people, but we didn't have a lot in the genre of daily devotionals for men. So I state very clearly in the introduction of the book, which hopefully the podcast will inspire men to go more deeply into the book if they haven't seen the book or haven't gotten a copy of the book yet when it first came out a year and a half ago, to go deeper into their faith, precisely because the culture is so challenging. I like to use the 2 examples of this, is that whether it's a television commercial that frequently makes the man, say a husband in the commercial, look like a complete buffoon.
Idiot, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To some of the so-called ideologies out there being promoted in the so-called manosphere, there's a lot attacking of men, and there's a lot of attacking of men in general, of marriage, of fatherhood, the increase of fatherless homes. So there's a lot attacking men, and so it was important for me in writing the book and in promoting the podcast now with the short audio pre-records of each day of the podcast posting, to hit upon topics, Teresa, that are both spiritual and temporal. So, for example, commitment, accountability, the reality of the devil, the importance of at least monthly confession, the importance of at least weekly Eucharist, accountability, the importance of staying out of debt, watch your mouth, know who your friends are, authentic fraternity and camaraderie, humility amidst not only trials, but also humility amidst successes, the virtue of diligence, aiming towards salvation, the reality of sin and vice. These are topics I wanted a peppering, if you will, of both spiritual topics and more secular topics that would address the man of any state in life and vocation, and encompass the reality of his whole day, the fullness of his day. So where the book is a 5 to 8 minute exercise each morning to begin the man's day by his reading that topic of the day, the podcast pulls the most pertinent points out of that day's book's meditation And the podcast is 5 minutes or less.
Which is perfect, right?
Yeah.
The amount of time, it's perfect for a busy man.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so he's able to listen to it and then can go deeper into it with the book if he so chooses. And already, I've already heard from quite a few men who already got the book right when it came out, or they've gotten it any time within this past year and a half. And they're in the reverse mode. They're saying the podcast is just a great refresher, knowing that they've already read the book and are rereading the book. So whether you haven't seen the book yet or you have, the podcast will inspire you in regards to the book's meditations. And I think it's important to say, too, that the podcast is a direct correlation with the book. So, for example, day one of the book is commitment. Day one of the podcast is commitment, right? Day 69 of the book is works of mercy and why we need to do them. Day 69 of the podcast is works of mercy. So there's a direct correlation with podcast to book and book to podcast.
Super important to you are in the spiritual world, but you're dealing with this and applying, and which we're supposed to do as Catholics. You're applying our faith to the reality of what we're facing in the world, because we're not just souls that are floating around. We are physical beings, male and female, made in the image and likeness of God, and we are in the world, as Scripture tells us, but not of the world. So this is real, right? This is a real podcast with real answers.
Right. And so my hope is that the timely wisdom offered by the podcast through the reality of the book will, help men put on what I like to call the armor of God for their daily struggles and help them withstand trials at home and at work, whether it be not being a good financier of your finances and you're greatly in debt and what can you do to get out of that, to internet pornography addiction, to a marriage breaking down, to a priestly vocation breaking down, to a young man who's not practicing chaste courtship in college, but he knows his heart is telling him that his baptism and confirmation sustained by regular Eucharist and regular confession is calling him to chaste courtship while he's in college. So these are the realities that I want the men to look at and embrace the truth of. We're called to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I think that's very important. So you look at this whole so-called looks maxing movement right now.
Oh,
I don't know
please.
if you've heard of
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so you know
about
it.
About
the
it.
whole thing about the handsomeness and the beauty. Okay, well, wait a minute here. As human persons, we are naturally attracted to beauty because our ultimate end is the beatific vision. It's eternal beatitude with God. But here's the problem with the culture. We're not to put our love for beauty in mere finite things.
Right.
And that's what the looks maxing movement is doing. Okay. And that's just one example. I could go on and on. But, Dr. Tim Gray, the president of the Augustine Institute, he says it all when he says this, quote, "The virtues give us a blueprint for being a man. Indeed, the very term virtue comes from the Latin word for man, vir, V-I-R. For the ancients, then, to be manly was precisely to be virtuous. The term virtue in Latin, virtus, the English word virtue, signifies power, strength, and ability. Thus it is that the virtues are habits that give us the power to act in a manly way with strength sufficient to do what is right. Without virtues, we will neither be godly nor real men. Virtues are indeed the building blocks then of our character, and without them, our moral and temporal lives will eventually collapse under the pressures of the world."
Yeah.
He hits the nail on the head, Dr. Tim Gray of the Augustine Institute.
Oh, the Augustine Institute's fabulous.
So my hope is that the podcast and the book will help strengthen men even more.
Well, I think it already is, based on the success of the book. Father, thank you for being with us. Love to have you back on to dive more deeply into what men are facing today and how you can help with this beautiful new podcast from our friend and fellow host, Father Wade Menezes. And the podcast is entitled Stand Firm, Be Strong, of course, after the name of his beautiful devotional book. We'll be right back. Shaun McAfee is with us. He is a Catholic author, speaker, and digital creator, very passionate about helping others encounter the truth, beauty, and power of the Catholic faith. Very similar to what we were talking about with Father Wade Menezes just a few minutes ago. And he is a convert. I love our converts. With a background in theology and serving in the military. Thank you for your service. He brings a very unique voice to modern evangelization, tradition, technology, reverence, and relevance. That sounds great on a business card. Should look great on a business card. Shaun, thanks for joining us. I know we're talking children's books this morning. Let's start with the book on St. Dominic and the Rosary, considering that we just had the Great Saints Feast Day over the weekend. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you. We were just talking about Bologna and how special it is to know where he is buried and why he is buried there. St. Dominic is very special to me, of course, as a lay Dominican, and I wrote this book because I wanted my children, and of course many children, to know the true story of how we received the Rosary, and of course how to pray it and how to promote it.
Tell us a little bit about that and how you express this to children in the book.
Well, I want children to know that Father Dominic was a real person, that he really did see the Blessed Virgin Mary in southern France, and that this rosary was used to untangle many knots of heresy and disbelief that was going on in southern France during the time. In fact, that whole region affected by the Albigensian heresy. Now, kids don't need to know what the Albigensian heresy exactly was, but they will know that the Rosary is a wonderful image of the life of Christ, and we spotlight through the mysteries the various truths of the moments of his life, that we can understand who he is and be drawn closer to him.
The book is entitled Saints and Sacramentals, St. Dominic and the Rosary, published by our friends at Tan Books, and the author, or the illustrator, is Jennifer Beam. The author, of course, is with us, Shaun McAfee. Now, what I think is really important is you as a convert, did you right away understand the meaning of the Rosary, that it's basically praying the Gospels and praying the life of Christ, and that it's very scriptural, or did you struggle with that as a convert? I'm just curious.
The Rosary was the most irritating thing to me whenever I converted. Yeah, I remember driving around at night, and it would play on Catholic radio, and I knew I had to be listening to Catholic radio. I was just so drawn to it. And this priest would pray it from the archdiocese, and it just irritated me, but there was something in me. I said, I can't turn this off. I need to learn it. I need to understand it. There's something here. And so it took many months, and I ended up starting a degree program with Holy Apostles College and Seminary, which isn't run by Dominicans, but several of the staff there are lay Dominicans or are fully professed, like Father Milady, God rest his soul. And I just grew to love Saint Dominic and the Dominican order, and I was like, okay, I got to look a little further into this Rosary thing, and it became a wonderful way to meditate, like we always say, on the life of Christ, and then to really understand, like, how did this get used, to defeat heresy. And I think to put it in a short way here on the radio is that whenever we look at the truths of who Christ is through these mysteries, it erases all error. If these are in Scripture and this really happened, then we can't deviate from these mysteries, and they just put an end to the error that we find in the world that wants to distort the gospel.
Isn't it amazing how God works? Did you ever think at any time in your life as a non-Catholic out there in the Protestant world with our Protestant brothers and sisters, whom we love and have taught us so much as well, but did you ever see yourself, could you imagine yourself being a Catholic speaker, writing Catholic books, especially about the saints and the Rosary?
This has been a terrific gift. I barely got out of high school. I did great in college, but I barely got out of high school. I hardly know how to read, and I mean it. I'm a slow reader, but this is just a passion project. I love sharing what I'm learning with everybody, and I feel like these aren't things that everybody should know on a basic level about the Catholic faith.
So you were talking about the Rosary, how irritating it was for you. What did you think of the saints? Did you hear anything about the saints as a Protestant?
Oh, the saints or the saint?
Saints, as plural, like the Catholic saints.
Oh, yeah. The saints enamored me. I was so enthralled with the stories of the early Christians and how they, of course, we have the cloud of witnesses, in Hebrew, and exactly how they treated these, local martyrs and how they would venerate them and how they would place churches over their relics. Like, once I read into that historical narrative, then the tradition of saint veneration really came easy for me. I absolutely fell in love with the saints. Now, I'll say this as a caveat. I had a very intellectual conversion. I wanted to read Aquinas, and, I came in reading Boethius and these philosophers and theologians. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until about 2 years in that I was like, wow, these saints, this is where I unlock the virtue, is learning how to walk with them through their life and then see myself in their shoes and try to imitate them.
Well, we have so much to discuss. We only have about 3 minutes left, so I want you to also have the opportunity to promote another beautiful book you've written about another very special saint and something else that's very important, of course, in our Catholic life, which you know so well now, Sacramentals, which actually is the first title of the Dominic book, Saints and Sacramentals, St. Dominic and the Rosary. But you also have a new one about St. Catherine and the Miraculous Medal, correct?
Yep. So this is the second in a series that we're building with TAN to teach parents and children how to, understand the history of these sacramentals and what to do with them, not just wear them around the neck or put them in the rear view mirror, to actually use them with devotion that they were meant to do. So this is the second book, and this is the story of St. Catherine Lavery, a very secret saint who wanted to remain anonymous her whole life, though she was given a very special mission from the Blessed Virgin to strike this medal in her image and to disperse it to the poor and to the needy, to those sick, those doubting in faith. And it became known as the Miraculous Medal because within about 6 months, hundreds of stories of miraculous events, conversions, healings, and this and that were reported to the Daughters of Charity. It was originally known as the Medal of Our Lady of Graces, but of course the popular name now is the Miraculous Medal.
Mm-hmm. So what's up next in the series? I love TAN books. They do such a great job. Well, what's coming next, do you think?
Yep, it's going to be St. Simon Stock and the Brown Scapular, a story of a young man who grew up living in a tree and then became a Carmelite and was given another one of the best sacramentals that we have.
All right, not to put any pressure on you, but there are over 10,000 saints in the Catholic Church. So does TAN have a plan for you to produce 10,000 plus nice. Books? Would that be fun?
That'd be great. I've got a pretty good idea of the next probably 9 books that could appear in this series to go over chalk and holy water and palms and everything in between. It's going to be fun.
But see, I think this is really great because sometimes we, as cradle Catholics, I'm speaking, for myself here, we can forget or take for granted the saints and the sacramentals and the depth and the beauty of the faith. I really do have such a respect for converts because sometimes as cradle Catholics, and I'm speaking only for myself and my husband, our journey is very similar. We fell away and came back to the church. We're kind of like the spoiled kids on the block. We have everything. We don't realize we have it. The converts or the reverts come along and they're like, wow, where have I been all these years? I could have had a V8, and boom, they start really revealing the depth and the beauty of the faith over and over again.
Yeah, but there's something about those who are born into the faith, too. It's about fidelity. We look at these people at Mass who celebrate their 50th anniversary, and we say, wow, look at that. Look, they made it. And so I look at cradle Catholics with just as much admiration.
Well, that's a great point, because I will say this. As a cradle Catholic, I really credit my parents with raising me in the faith, even though I didn't quite get it until I had my own come-to-Jesus moment. So thank you for helping non-Catholics, converts, and also cradle Catholics appreciate our faith. Where do we find out all about you if we want you to speak, in addition to finding your great book, Shaun? What's your website?
Go to ShaunMcAfee.com, and my name is spelled with a U.
Okay.
Shaun.
ShaunMcAfee. Shaun McAfee. Thanks so much. We'll be right back. So yesterday, after the show, as I was monitoring my email and preparing for the next radio program today, I came across a press release from our friends at University of Mary. University of Mary expanding tuition-free Catholic education to 65 scholarship, which is amazing. And then boom, like literally, 15 minutes after that, Kelly Salomon, who joins us every Tuesday for Newman Guide News from the Cardinal Newman Society, said, hey, guess what? This is a great story. We're going to bring someone on to talk about it. And so Kelly is here with a very special guest. Of course, Kelly's with us, as I said, every Tuesday morning. So Kelly, introduce our wonderful guest. And this is a very good news story regarding scholarships for Catholic students. So do introduce our guest, and we'll get started with the conversation.
Wonderful. Yes, we're so excited to welcome Rachael Brash, the Vice President for Enrollment Services from the University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota. She's been on the leadership team under President Monsignor Shea for many years. And we're so excited to have her come on and share more about what's happening at the University of Mary that's good news for Catholic families, where they can find faithful and affordable Catholic education. Teresa, I thought this was a great follow-up conversation to one we had just recently on the federal school choice tax credit that's going to impact K-12 education. And now here is another new exciting development at the higher ed level. Rachael, great to have you on. Please tell us what's happening at the University of Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Rachael, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Teresa. Well, we're very excited about this because, like you said, Teresa, we like good news too. And when it comes to higher education, there's this perpetual question that goes on about the value, and oftentimes that's just reduced to money. How much does it cost? But of course, the true value specifically of a Catholic education is much deeper than that, as we all know. And we know that our sponsors, the Benedictine Sisters of Annunciation Monastery, they always wanted us to be affordable and accessible to people, because that is the root of Catholic education, is to meet people where they are. And so to do that, back in 2023, we launched the Nursing Academy, which is a tuition-free nursing academy in which students complete their bachelor's degree in 8 semesters, but it's through our innovative year-round campus program, which is 2.6 years. We just had our first graduates of that program here last spring, so we were excited to celebrate them. But we've expanded that because it was so popular and so appreciated by people that we expanded it out we used to have just 30 tuition-free scholarships, which is still pretty good, but we have now 65 in the areas of elementary ed, accounting, engineering, humanities, respiratory therapy, and, of course, our flagship program in nursing.
So how does a student go about finding out about the scholarships, Rachel, and also applying for one of them possibly?
Everything can be found on our website, which is umary.edu/tuition-free. And our applications are open right now for the fall 2027 students. So those people who are going to be freshmen in the fall of 2027, applications are open until January 10th. We also on our website have different Q&A sessions, virtual Q&A sessions that we're having here through January, and I'm on every single one of them. And we talk about what does this mean, how does it work, and how do people apply. They can submit their application right on our website.
That's awesome. We're talking with, of course, Rachael Brash, Vice President for Enrollment Services at University of Mary. And, of course, she's brought on the program graciously by our weekly guest, Kelly Salomon. Newman Guide News on Tuesdays from the Cardinal Newman Society. So this university, Kelly, is one of only a select group of Newman Guide recommended Catholic universities in the U.S. So why is this school so much admired by the Newman Guide folks?
Yes, University of Mary is, there's more than 200 Catholic colleges in the country. We recommend about 10% of them as model Catholic colleges in the Newman Guide. University of Mary has made such exciting steps strengthening its Catholic identity over the last decade. A beautiful core curriculum with great career preparation coupled with it, rich sacramental life, Division II athletics that incorporates the faith into the athletics. It's a really exciting, authentically Catholic university, and it's very exciting to see them taking these steps to make it more affordable for Catholic families. That was another question I had for you, Rachel. What's the response been from Catholic families now that you've been doing, offering some of these for 3 years? What's been the response to these tuition-free scholarships?
Absolutely tremendous. When we opened this up for Nursing Academy, our program has grown exponentially. And of course, we can only accept 30 people each year into this program. However, the majority of the people who applied for the program, they were able to interact with our university. They're still electing to come here because, of course, we have a lot of other scholarships available. This isn't the only option that we have for students, but they want to come here because we are who we say we are. For many of those reasons you just listed out, Kelly, but we care very deeply about the whole person. The purpose of an education here, of course, we want people to be good teachers and accountants and nurses and all of those things, but we want them to thrive in life. That's what we're really called to do, and so we make sure that we pack every single moment we can with great experiences, including with the Academy's a free pilgrimage to Europe, which of course
I'll sign up for that one.
Which is great.
Not that I have to because I live there part-time, but I'm saying I wish I would have had that when I was in college, for crying out loud. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just very exciting.
No, it's really great. We bring our students over. They complete coursework. They're with our faculty, and we start out, of course, in Rome. And we're over there at our campus in Rome. We travel up through Rome, and we end up going through Europe. We visit, really beautiful places. We learn about the history of our faith and how this all plays out. They say all these ties in, right, to our main campus. But then we really focus in on the dignity of life, and we bring them to Dachau. And we show them what happens when we make decisions about the dignity of the human person, which is a difficult time for our students to be able to be immersed in that place and to hear about everything that happened. But then we bring them to Lourdes. And our nursing students actually stay in the hospital in Lourdes, and they provide care. This is part of their education. They are providing care to people coming to Lourdes, and it's a beautiful healing experience for, of course, those that they serve. But this is a true growth moment for our students to understand the impact that they play when they immerse themselves really in a true Catholic experience and a true Catholic education. And they come back not just understanding more things about how to be a good teacher or a good accountant or a good nurse, but they understand what it means to really be able to immerse themselves in the goodness and the beauty of life.
And what happens when you don't follow the Catholic faith and you don't have God in your life, the extremes that could happen. And Rachael, this is so important. We're seeing so many young people whisked away by certain extremist groups, especially on the left, and having no concept of what happened in our world in World War II and other history, points in history that changed us forever and not in a good way. And nor do they see the history of the Catholic faith beyond maybe their own little world. We're talking again with Rachael Brash, Vice President for Enrollment Services at University of Mary, along with Kelly Salomon, our regular guest for our Newman Guide News. Kelly brought Rachael along to talk about their wonderful program that's expanding. They're expanding their pioneering tuition-free academy, now providing 65 scholarships every year for high-achieving students pursuing careers in some of the nation's most critical fields. And that's the other point I wanted to make, Rachael, that this is the real world. You're not just saying, okay, we're going to stay in our spiritual bubble. You're showing them life, and you're making sure that they are going to go into areas that are really important in terms of the dignity of the human person, especially, right, nursing, elementary education, the importance of engineering. All of these careers, all of these lines of work are vocations that impact the world.
That's right. And it really goes back to one of our charisms of as a university, and that's pioneering courage. And what that means is that we know that there's this unshakable impulse to serve others. But that means that we have to go beyond our realm of comfort, and we have to do things that never have been done before. That's what our students have to be prepared for, and that's why we've looked at how do we do higher education differently? How do we make it so that students can attend, the most affordable, serious Catholic university, and to be able to not only have top-notch faculty in their field, but to do it at a place that cares about them and wants them to thrive within the whole of their life. That's really what this is all about.
So, Kelly, when you come on with me and I hear about these amazing schools, I want to go back to college and I want to get my cute little backpack. I want to go experience a Catholic college. I mean, I did have a very good journalism education. I went to a public university, but there's so much more here, so much depth that I didn't get because I was in a public university. We had a little Catholic parish and whatnot, but my goodness, these students are so blessed. In terms of your response, Kelly, when you write about these schools and promote them, what do your followers and supporters of the Cardinal Newman Society say?
Well, they speak a lot about what Rachael was mentioning earlier of, there is this questioning about the value of higher education today, and in the rapidly changing world and the advancements in AI, what is higher education worth it? At what cost? And the Catholic families who follow us are really looking for something more. They're looking for the formation of their student. They're looking for the type of person they're going to become after their years at this university. They're looking for what their faith is going to be like, what kind of friends they're going to make, what kind of spouse they're going to meet. They're looking at a much broader picture. And when you couple it with something like a tuition-free academy and that year-round campus, which, Rachael, I'd love to hear you explain a little more about that, because that, again, is another thing that I don't see being done in a lot of places. I think it's really meeting the needs of Catholic families today.
Yeah, and this started out actually by our president, Monsignor Shea, walking through campus one summer. We're up here in North Dakota, and we're a hardy group, but it can get cold in the winter.
Yeah.
We know that, and we accept that. But summer is a beautiful time. And Monsignor said, wow, what happens if we think about our educational model differently and have a thriving campus life year-round? And that's exactly what we've done. Year-round campus is not a new initiative. Certainly, our tuition-free academies build on that. But our students, they have another option than just like the standard 4-year experience. Our students can complete 8 full semesters, but they're going fall, spring, and summer. We still give them plenty of breaks. We want them to get outside and have fun. That's part of college, too. But they are able to complete their bachelor's degree in 2.6 years and also then enroll in one of our master's degrees. So in 4 years, they're walking across the stage with their bachelor's and their master's degree. So this is yet another way for people to be able to attain their education quicker and more affordably.
That is awesome. And also it just makes it, I think, a little bit easier. Maybe there's fewer bills as well because there isn't as long of an education process, so it's more manageable. But to be able to make that commitment and to do this in the summer, and of course that part of the country is so beautiful in the summertime, in the wintertime as well. But as you said, it's like where I live in Michigan, it gets very cold. But what a great opportunity. Rachel, thank you so much. I want to give you the opportunity before we wrap up to give us your website again for the University of Mary and where they find more information about the expanded scholarships.
Certainly. It is umary.edu/tuition free, or give us a call, 701-355-8030.
And Kelly, any final words, my dear, before we wrap up this morning?
Well, Catholic families can learn more about places like University of Mary at our fall online Newman Guide College Fair. Teresa, I'm sure we'll talk about that more in coming weeks, but save the date for October 8th will be our online Newman Guide College Fair.
Pretty exciting. Every time we do these, again, I want to go back to school, but I don't want to have to do all the tests. Can I just come and sit in class?
Sit in on the classes.
Yes, absolutely.
I can audit the classes. That's what I want to do. I want to audit the classes and not have to do all the tests and the paperwork and the reports. How beautiful. Thank you, ladies, both. What a great discussion, a very positive story on another university making a huge difference in our church and in our world, University of Mary. And, of course, thanks to our friends, including Kelly Salomon at the wonderful Cardinal Newman Society. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to our number 1 of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you on this Tuesday, August 11th. Of course, another great feast day in the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, especially where our foundress, Mother Angelica, and our network, EWTN, are concerned because, of course, Mother was a Poor Clare, and Mother was devoted to Saint Clare of Assisi and Saint Francis of Assisi, and we have an anniversary this week as well. Later in the week, we will be talking about that. But if you want to learn more about Saint Clare of Assisi, tune in to our number 2 of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra because we will be diving into some quotes of Saint Clare. And there's a beautiful story on the EWTNnews.com website as well about some interesting facts about the life of Saint Clare of Assisi. And then we'll also be sharing a little bit more tomorrow as well on our Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. I do already remind you I have a full 5-minute segment about the friendship between Clare and Francis in my Unknown St. Francis series. It's a free EWTN Learn series. Again, the Unknown St. Francis. You can find it simply by going to EWTN.com/St. Francis. They had a wonderful friendship. She was about 11 years younger than St. Francis, and it's so neat when you walk through the streets of Assisi and down below Monsalvatio through Santa Maria dell'Angeli, you really get the sense of their friendship and especially the impact that relationship had on the world and the church. We're also going to be talking about accompanying people in crisis situations in their marriage, also those going through divorce as well. Carolyn Clicka, a divorce healing coach, is back with us again. That's coming up next. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
Happy Feast of Saint Clare of Assisi. Pray for us. We'll talk more about her in 2 cents this morning. By the way, I do have a lot of information in both my books, both my First Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Volume 1, about Assisi, St. Francis, and St. Clare, but then I have a whole book dedicated to it. In addition to talking about, obviously, the detailed life of St. Francis, St. Clare pops up all over the place because she became a Poor Clare and founded that order with the help of St. Francis because she was so influenced by the beautiful message of the little poor man, the Il Poverello, St. Francis of Assisi. So book number 2, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Volume 2, is all about that. We'll be diving into this really deeply. Again, tomorrow we'll have a little bit more time. But my goodness, 2 segments, one today and one tomorrow for Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. Certainly not enough to talk about the lives of these great saints. And if I can grab it, I'm going to try to share with you a really fun video that I did as part of my series, The Unknown St. Francis, which is a free series. And you may download that for free at EWTN.com/St. Francis, shot all on location in Assisi and in central Italy and in Tuscany and Lazio. It's gorgeous. It's free. And there's a segment there about holy friendships, mainly focusing on the friendship of St. Clare and St. Francis. So we'll talk about St. Clare coming up, and I'll describe her tomb, her crypt, and the places you need to visit in Assisi if you're going this year in order to get closer and learn more about the life of this great saint. And then we're going to have 2 segments, and I'm glad we have 2 segments with Carolyn Clicka. She's back with us. And she's going to talk to us about Catholic parishes across the country and how the church in the U.S. and North America is now launching what they're calling a new culture of accompaniment, dealing with divorce, separated, or couples in a marital crisis. And she is a certified divorce healing coach. And she has a passion in working with loved ones and couples who are struggling because she went through a very painful situation in her own life. She'll share her testimony and how her ministry began when she joins us, and how you can find out more information about how the church is now expanding its services to those in need when it comes to divorce and troubled marriages. Let's take a look at the forecast before we move on to the news this morning on a Tuesday morning, August 11th. We have severe thunderstorms moving in, according to the National Weather Service, starting across the Ohio Valley. Severe storms damaging wind gusts will be possible from the mid-Mississippi Valley into parts, as I mentioned, of the Ohio Valley, and the Central Appalachians are also saying heavy rain associated with the storms may lead to considerable flash and city flooding, urban flooding, that could impact several areas across portions of the Ohio Valley. And then, because it is the dog days of summer in the middle of August, we have midsummer heat persisting from the Central Plains, of course, to the southeast. It is a Tuesday morning. We appreciate your listenership. Thank you for tuning in to hour number 2 here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Let's get started with the news on a Tuesday, the Feast of Saint Clare of Assisi. The Democratic Governor Maura Healey signing a bill allowing abortion at any point in pregnancy in her home state of Massachusetts, making it the 11th state to impose no limits on abortion. That legislation signed yesterday, removing all of the state's restrictions on abortion after 24 weeks. EWTNnews.com explains an elective late-term abortion may be done based upon the professional judgment of the physician performing it under the law. Marjorie Dannenfelser, who heads up SBA Pro-Life America, saying in a statement, it should shock the conscience that tens of thousands of unborn Americans are barbarically dismembered limb by limb and torn apart every single year. Sadly, that number will only increase with Governor Healey's approval of the abortion up until birth bill. Under the previous statute, state law allowed abortion during the first 24 weeks of pregnancy if a physician says it was necessary to preserve the life, physical, or mental health of the mother because of a lethal fetal anomaly or diagnosis, or because a fetus would not likely survive outside the uterus. According to a study released in 2024 from the Charlotte Lozier Institute, 46 of 50 countries in Europe limit abortion after 15 weeks, a point by which the baby feels pain. The Institute also finding over 60,000 abortions occur after 15 weeks each year. Dr. Anthony Fauci privately raising concerns that the COVID-19 vaccine could theoretically be linked to miscarriages in expectant mothers, despite having publicly insisted there were no red flags for pregnant women. In a January 25, 2021 text exchange with then Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky and the soon-to-be Surgeon General Vivek Murthy have been discussing whether the vaccine posed any risk to women who followed the two-shot regimen earlier or later in their pregnancies. Days later, on February 3rd, Fauci said during a Q&A live stream with the Journal of the American Medical Association that the FDA found thus far, and we have to be careful, but thus far, no red flags about pregnant women. The message is released by Senators Rand Paul of Kentucky and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, taken from more than 34,000 texts and 522 voicemails obtained by the Senate Homeland Security Committee last week from Fauci's government-issued cell phone. Senator Ron Johnson requesting transcribed interviews with Dr. Fauci and other Food and Drug Administration officials as part of his investigation into the government's response to the pandemic. He has alleged that senior FDA officials ignored warnings the agency's COVID vaccine safety monitoring system was failing to detect potential safety signals. The newly released messages are released after Fauci appeared before the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee last month. And the death toll has risen to more than 130 after a magnitude 7.4 earthquake striking Colombia yesterday. In San Jose, California, restaurant owner John Pennincore says he is relieved his family is back home and okay, but worries for those who still can't connect with loved ones in Colombia.
In one moment, everything down, In one moment, in 3 seconds, your life, the people, the family, babies.
Rescue efforts are, of course, underway to try and find survivors who may be trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings. The epicenter of the quake located some 200 miles west of the capital city of Bogota, with reports that it could be felt in parts of Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the Trump administration is closely monitoring the situation. Meanwhile, of course, a little more than a month after the massive earthquake devastated Venezuela, the earthquake is rocking Colombia now, causing, as we just said, what appears to be significant damage. In Florida, Doral-based Global Empowerment Mission Chief Operating Officer Jeff Pavlovich says he's ready to jump into action.
Right now, we're sending our team into Colombia to assess the situation and see if there's a need for additional aid. Our family necessity kits or anything that's needed.
He says it's too early to know if they'll need additional volunteer shifts at their Doral warehouse in Florida to help pack supplies for Colombia. In other news this morning, President Trump says Iran should pay for damages for the harm the regime has inflicted on the world for the past 50 years. The president was asked about Iran's latest demands on Monday as negotiations play out with the U.S.
They asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed.
President Trump saying the U.S. Navy, meanwhile, now has control over the Strait of Hormuz.
We have a blockade that's been infallible. It's a steel wall, and we let people in that we want to let in, and those people come in, and they've been coming in and they're going out, so it's actually open now.
Over the weekend, Iran again had a number of demands of the U.S., including the U.S. must completely compensate them for damages from the 5-month-long war. Now, Trump telling the White House, as you heard, he thinks Iran should indeed pay for all of the people that they've killed or hurt over the nearly last 5 decades. And the president signing an executive order focused on childhood vaccine schedules. Speaking from the White House, Trump said the order would split the childhood MMR vaccine into 3 shots.
Effective immediately, my administration is recognizing gold standard childhood vaccine recommendations for only 11 core vaccinations against the most serious and dangerous diseases, along with the MMR, which hopefully will be split up.
The order would also push for all childhood immunizations to be administered at separate medical visits instead of one, COVID-19 and influenza vaccines no longer being recommended for all young children. Trump mentioning the growing rates of autism in the U.S. and the Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. indicating more research is underway to see if there's a connection between autism and increased vaccine or another environmental exposure. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also moving to officially define what makes certain foods ultra-processed. HHS Secretary Kennedy Jr. announcing yesterday the federal government's first proposed definition of ultra-processed foods will be revealed soon.
The first time we will have a consistent federal framework to study these foods, to understand their effects on human health, and to build a stronger and lasting nutrition policy.
In its announcement, Kennedy saying nearly 60% of the American diet is made up of ultra-processed foods, and childhood obesity now affects more than 1 in 5 American children. And Mark Mayfield tells us Todd Blanche has now been sworn in as the next Attorney General of the United States.
The ceremony took place in the Oval Office on Monday. The Senate confirmed Blanche on Saturday after weeks of debate with a handful of Republicans in opposition. The vote was 50-49, with Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska joining Democrats in opposition. Some Republicans expressed concerns about Blanche having a possible conflict of interest because he was President Trump's former personal attorney and because he helped create Trump's now rescinded $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Joint Base Charleston has been renamed Joint Base Lindsey Graham in honor of the late senator in South Carolina. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent sharing a few words.
From today forward, these planes will have Joint Base Graham on their tails. A reminder that Senator Graham was the American people's workhorse. That is why Lindsey Graham's legacy belongs here, and it's why this base will bear his name with pride.
A ceremony was held yesterday in Charleston with a number of administration's officials, along with Pete Hegseth, who was also there, War Secretary, and Graham's sister, Senator Darlene Graham, all in attendance. Hegseth and Graham fought against radical leftist ideology that's running rampant in the media in his final years. His sister is serving out the remainder of his term and is running for a full term today, actually, in a crowded Republican field. Graham died unexpectedly, of course, on July 11th at the age of only 71. And speaking of the election today, a full primary election, full slate going on. Voters heading to the polls in Alabama, Connecticut, Minnesota, Vermont, Wisconsin, and in South Carolina, as we just mentioned, where there is a special Senate primary after Senator Lindsey, his sudden death, of course, earlier this summer. The governor appointed his sister Darlene Graham to serve out the remainder of the term, and she's running for his full term Tuesday in a crowded Republican field. And meanwhile, in the state of Wisconsin, all eyes are on the Democratic primary race for governor, where Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong has skyrocketed in the polls. That's a look at the news on a busy Tuesday morning, the feast of Saint Clare of Assisi. We appreciate your listenership. And speaking of Saint Clare, we'll learn more about her up next. Her life in Assisi, how she discovered St. Francis, and what it means to us today, especially here at EWTN. We'll be right back. "17 minutes past the hour. It is a Tuesday morning. What a great month of August for feast days in the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Faith. On Saturday, we had Saint Dominic. Amen. Of course, Order of Preachers, amazing order. Another amazing order two will be discussing this morning in this segment. The Order of the Poor Clares, and also, of course, the Franciscans, the Friars Minor, the first order founded by the great Saint Francis of Assisi. Such an important feast day today, and we think about the friendship between these two amazing people from the town of Assisi in the central region of Umbria, about 2 hours north of Rome. Saint Clare of Assisi and Saint Francis of Assisi. Saint Clare, as we know, and there's a direct connection for obvious reasons to EWTN. We'll talk more about this on Friday, of course, with some of our guests, the big anniversary we have coming up this week. Saint Clare, the patroness of television. Do you know why? The date is often cited as February 14th, 1958, Valentine's Day, rather than Clare, the patron of TV in a general sense. A decision, and this, by the way, is on our EWTN website, decision coming in context, the mid-20th century, when television was beginning to emerge as a powerful new medium. Okay, so some background for you. The reason for the appointment, Pope Pius XII, writing, the Church encourages inventions and discoveries, and that television, quote, reproduces the sights and sounds of distant events in so vivid a manner that one would think to be actually present at them. So obviously he's talking about live television. He acknowledged its potential for great good, and listen to this, but also warned of its power to influence the family and society and the need for a heavenly safeguard. So there's two reasons why he named her the patroness of television. Most importantly, he thought Clare would be great because she embodied poverty, humility, and trust in God, qualities he hoped would guide the responsible use of TV. And then the other reason, and here's the story behind this choice, the inspiration coming from a medieval Italian tradition, according to the Acts of the process of canonization. On Christmas Eve in 1253, Saint Clare, too ill to attend Mass, was left alone in bed. She later said she felt the presence of the Church, hearing the organ, the responsorial psalms, and the full office as if she were physically present. She had a vision of the Mass on the wall in her cell. So, of course, that experience resonated with the modern meaning of television as a vision from afar because of her vision of the Mass. But how many of us realize that the other reason she was named a patron of television was because the Pope, back in the 20th century, thought we needed someone to guide the responsible use of television. That, to me, is, I think, just as powerful, if not more so, than her actually seeing a Mass and having basically a live TV broadcast back in medieval times in her cell in the convent. If we look at what's happening in the world today with media, wow, what a great saint she can be for us, to ask for her intercession to protect our young people, to ask for her intercession to protect us and to give us strength, not to spend too much time on watching something, because you can watch TV everywhere now, especially on your cell phone. It's all there. To make sure that we are choosing well and choosing wisely. All right, so she was born in 1194 into a very wealthy, noble Assisi family. Guess when she left all of that behind? When she was in her 20s, in her 30s, she was 18 years old. She heard St. Francis preach, and that was it. Put a fork in her. She was done. A forchetta. She was done. She knew she needed to follow him because he was going to bring her closer to Jesus. And not only did she follow Francis and support him, and they had a very great friendship, she also, with his help and guidance, founded the Poor Clares, a contemplative religious order dedicated to prayer and Eucharistic devotion. And we have, of course, the Poor Clares at EWTN and the Franciscan Friars at EWTN. And as a matter of fact, in my book, right, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Volume 2, Father Joseph writes a chapter about the influence of St. Clare and St. Francis on EWTN and the spirituality of the network, which is a very Franciscan spirituality. She was the first woman, by the way, to write a rule for a religious order that received papal approval. So this is in the medieval times, all right, in the 13th century. And she is way ahead of her time. The first woman to write a rule for a religious order that received papal approval. And you know what's so beautiful? Is when you visit her crypt in the Basilica of Santa Chiara, you will actually see in a huge wall-to-wall room that is filled with relics behind glass, you will see a portion of that handwritten rule. Written, penciled out by her own hands. There's a portion of it you can see. Now, she was cloistered. There's also a small section of bars behind which she would, see people and speak, because she was a cloistered nun. They have locks of her hair. They have some of her habits that are there. There is a robe that she made for St. Francis that is there. So all of this is available to see and to venerate when you go to Saint Clare of Assisi in the beautiful town of Assisi. She's also very much connected down below with Santa Maria degli Angeli and the Porciuncula. Now, the Porciuncula, we celebrated the establishment and of this very important church in the life of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare just recently as well in the Catholic Church. That is the Little Portion Church, one of the first churches that St. Francis rebuilt physically. Okay? And at Santa Maria degli Angeli, below Assisi, is where, if I didn't mention this already, St. Francis conferred the habit on Saint Clare of Assisi. So in summary, and by the way, this beautiful report on the life of Saint Clare and why she was named Patron of TV can be found at EWTNnews.com. The title is How a Christmas Mass Vision Made Saint Clare the Patron of Television. The Pope, back in 1958, named Saint Clare of Assisi the patroness of TV, drawing a symbolic link again between her medieval vision of Mass and the modern ability of television to bring distant events vividly to life, while appearing to her virtues to guide the medium's moral use. I don't think a lot of us knew about the second part of that. We knew that her vision was associated with her being named the patron of TV, but how many knew about her being chosen as someone to guide us in moral use of television as well? So a few quotes from this great saint and the bestie of St. Francis of Assisi. Love him totally, who gave himself totally for your love. Love God, serve God. Everything, she said, is in that. Our body is not made of iron, she added. Our strength is not that of stone. Live and hope in the Lord, and let your service be according to reason. We become what we love, and who we love shapes what we become. Saint Clare of Assisi, pray for us. More about the places associated with her tomorrow on our Shrines and Wonders Wednesday segment, as well as their very special friendship, St. Clare and St. Francis. Appreciate your listenership. Thanks for tuning in to second hour of Catholic Connection. This is such an important topic, and it's something that so many people can relate to, whether it's happening to themselves or a child or a friend or, an immediate loved one. So important for us to help those who are in crisis situations in marriage, maybe going through a divorce, maybe divorced and looking for help and hope and guidance. And that's why we're blessed by the ministry of our lovely sister in the Lord, Carolyn Clicka, who's been with us before. And Carolyn, this is pretty exciting. There's more going on in terms of an accompaniment effort in the church, in terms of parishes in North America, to work with and accompany divorced people, separated, or couples in marital crisis. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your work. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Teresa.
So Build a New Life Workshop. I want to talk about how that started, how your website, everything started. Give us the best place to find out, of course, about the workshops, the upcoming events in early September.
Yeah, thank you. So aboundingjoyministry.com/BNLW, like Build New Life Workshop, is the place to find more information.
So your story is incredible. You really have done something, I think, phenomenal in terms of making, by your own words, your misery your ministry. So take us back. And when you were going through your crisis, did you ever think that you would be in the position now to help others who are going through the same thing?
Not ever. Never imagined it. In fact, I never imagined being divorced, being annulled, didn't imagine any of that, because when I was a young girl, I was a child of divorce from the age of 6. And it impacted me so much that I really asked the Lord, please spare me the suffering of divorce. I think with you, I can handle anything else, because there are many trials that we go through as an adult. And I was married 30 years, very difficult marriage. My husband, unbeknownst to me before, had a lot of emotional and psychological issues. God love him. And after 29 years, he decided that he wanted to go forward in life, presenting as a female. And we had 5 children, 3 biological and 2 adopted. And long story short, we just had, such a difficult time. But even through all of the difficulty with his physical ailments and his emotional and mental just struggles, just a major, major struggle. Even with all that, I never considered divorce. Why? Because divorce is a sacred covenant instituted by God, and I took vows before him and before God. And so it never occurred to me to divorce because of difficulty or because of unhappiness. But the marriage, unfortunately, was fractured because he made the decision to essentially default his role as husband and father. And again, I say that not with judgment, but with great compassion for the suffering that he went through. Good news, though, is after 10 years, he came back to his authentic identity and has done a lot of healing. But we did go through the annulment process all the way to Rome, and an annulment was granted. And that was a major section of healing, just very healing experience, and really shed light on the truth of what was going on in that relationship.
How long after your situation, your divorce, did you decide there has to be something else out there for people who are struggling like I did?
Well, when you go through divorce, in fact, when I was married and I would hear about someone divorcing, unfortunately, I thought, why didn't they just try harder? Like, I would never divorce. And I had an ignorant frame of mind. I did not understand it, and so I understand when other people make comments like that or have those views. But going through the separation and divorce and that discernment, different priests told me different things. I found that they were not consistent. And so I would go from one priest to get spiritual direction to another, until I encountered a canon lawyer who really clarified everything very clearly. And I realized through that process that there just aren't resources out there. There isn't support and there isn't knowledge. And even at that time, I had no idea the ministry that God had prepared for me. But he taught me, going through that whole process, many things. Like, for example, I saw a field with landmines, and the landmines represented sin. And I realized that I was going through a very spiritually dangerous period, because it's very easy when you're in high emotion to let bitterness, resentment, greed, selfishness enter in. And I realized there's going to be a lot of temptations. How am I going to navigate that? And there were a lot of places where the Lord really guided me very specifically. And later I came to find that other people didn't know those things. And I realized that some of the things that, in the ways that he had guided me, weren't just for me, but were for other people as well. And that was sort of the start of a ministry to the to those who are struggling in marriage, separated, and divorced.
So how long has it been now that you've had Abounding Joy?
About 10 years, almost 10 years,
Wow. Wow. I want to give folks a website again, aboundingjoyministry.com, with our wonderful guest, our dear sister in the Lord, Carolyn, who's been through so much, but is really sharing her experience and her misery as a ministry in helping others. And you can hear the healing. You really can hear the healing in your voice and your heart. It comes through, which I think is a great testimony to what the Lord has brought you through and where he's brought you to now. So we're going into the break. I want to remind folks that there's all kinds of information on her beautiful website, Abounding Joy. She's also done many other interviews on EWTN and other Catholic outlets. You can check out the fact that she is very well viewed by Catholic media and Catholic experts, and she does everything according to, of course, the beautiful teachings of the Church. And we want to talk about, Carolyn, when we come back, how, thanks be to God, we have more Catholic parishes that are adopting your programs. And you're mentioning in the information which you sent to our production team, Deb and Richard, Catholic parishes across North America have now launched what we're calling a new culture of accompaniment. Divorced, separated, or couples in marital crisis. And I think this is huge because we've heard this as a deacon couple. We do a lot, as you know. You and I have talked about this, Deacon Dominic and I, who also had a crisis in our marriage. But we kind of much had to do it on our own. There wasn't that much available. So that's why these programs are so important. But we hear from a lot of people at the parish level. They feel that they are walking alone. They feel that they don't have anybody or, with whom they can converse or share or get some sort of an understanding of where they're supposed to go and how they're supposed to navigate, as you said, this minefield. So we'll talk about that in terms of how her program is growing and how you can bring it to your parish as well. And there's a special event coming up also on September 3rd you don't want to miss. We'll be right back. Carolyn Clicka was back with us. She was on with us previously. We're talking about her beautiful ministry, Abounding Joy. And of course, the website has tons of information. You can go to aboundingjoyministry.com. And before we get to the event that we want to promote for you, because it's a wonderful, very powerful course and extended course, I wanted you to share, we were talking about this during the break, and of course, as someone who talks about keeping people connected to the world and the faith and to look at everything through the lenses of Scripture and the teachings of the Catholic Church, I'm frequently talking about the gender ideology. And I was asking you if you could comment on this, because there are probably other people, if you went through it, I'm sure there are many other people who are having a similar experience where a spouse is getting very confused and tries to identify as the opposite sex. Are you hearing more tragic situations similar to yours, Carolyn?
Yes, I'd love to say no, but yes, I hear more and more of this, that there is this confusion, and sometimes it happens after marriage, where a person marries a person who seems to be, the opposite sex, and everything seems well, but then there's confusion that enters in through various means, and then that person decides they want to transition in presenting as the opposite sex, and how devastating that is in a very unique way for the children and for the spouse. And it's just such a tragic thing. It's even, I'd say, more difficult than the average divorce, which is absolute devastation, no question. But yeah, it really is a growing issue.
Who knew when you were going through it that would be part of your, helping people, more people seeing this? All right, so take us to the event on September 3rd. That begins on September 3rd. What will it be? How will it work? And give us the details.
Yeah, so Build a New Life Workshop is a 12-week support and healing intensive, and it covers it covers healing spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, interpersonally, physically, financially, and in every way, because we're body, mind, soul, and spirit. And to heal, we need that healing in all those dimensions. It starts September 3rd, and the really neat thing is this fall, for the first time, We have over 20 parishes who are engaging with us. They're hosting the program. They have a facilitator. They're welcoming people in person. And the event is live streamed so that if you go to Sacred Heart Parish, your local parish, if it's hosting, you're there. You have the incarnational reality of being supported and accompanied by the local people in the parish. But there also is the live stream teaching where I am teaching various themes. And then there's breakout groups for discussion and reflection. And then there's group coaching to answer questions. So it's been called a living restoration, a living triage, because it's live. It's not like just a book where it's cookie cutter, but it actually addresses the issues that come up each week for the people who are involved.
And you were mentioning, again, in our correspondence and setting up this interview, that there are more and more parishes recognizing the need for this, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think and one of the messages that we're trying to make people aware is that we don't just need a program. So, you know, my goal is not to promote a program, but it's to create a culture of accompaniment so that every parish has a system to welcome people. So whether it's about having a hurting Catholic know that the church is there for them and how to take the first step. And so, you know, so parishes, are they recognizing the need and seeing the hidden flock? I call it a hidden flock because there's so much shame and embarrassment around divorce as a Catholic. And so oftentimes people don't come forward. So I just want to say to people, stand up, go to your parish, ask for what you need so that the parish is aware, and parishes be aware that people need you. People need a culture of accompaniment. They need guidance. And sometimes people in the church are saying, well, we don't want to promote a divorce. Of course we don't. We don't want to promote abortion either, but yet we have healing programs for those who go through it. So we're not approving or affirming. That's a little bit of a misconception. Divorce ministry is to guide, to bring people who are off track or who are in the ditch, wounded, either one, into guidance back into the truth, because there's so many identity lies and misconceptions, and in that way bring them closer to Christ and the church. And then also to offer healing, to accompany them. That's our role as the church. And it's so important that Pope Leo has convened a summit on the family in October, and he's invited all the heads of the bishop conferences to discuss the family. And what I'm saying is, as an important part of that is, how do we minister to the most fractured families, which, you know, who are going through separation and divorce?
What I find very fascinating is, despite the fact that our culture is just all about sex with whomever, do what you want with your body. One day you can be a woman, one day you could be a man, you could have 2 or 3 and 4 people in a relationship, doesn't matter. And yet people are still ashamed of divorce. To me, that says something very important, that deep down they know at some level the sanctity of marriage. Do you think?
Absolutely. When we're in a one flesh union, even if in our mind we don't have all the concepts filled in our soul is affected. When we have a sacramental marriage, we are in that one flesh union, and our souls recognize that. And so, there is that deep recognition. We know instinctively that a child deserves to come into the world with an intact family, a mother and a father present. That's God's design for us. And so we recognize it, even if not consciously.
Why do you think it's taken so long to have more available for people going through similar situations? Carolyn, what do you think?
I've asked some family life directors what are the obstacles, and they've said, we want it, We don't know how to do it. We don't have people who are trained. We haven't the experience in it. And so it's much easier to do marriage prep and NFP teaching, and also for some reason annulments. And so we've got these pathways to baptize your baby, to get married, to get annulled. But between that, in the church, there is the bridge is partially out. It's not, for a lot of parishes, they don't have a pathway. Their staff doesn't know what to do for and how to address this. And so that's one of the reasons that Abounding Joy instituted divorce ministry training this year, and will continue that. We had over about 125 people from 7 countries and over 60 dioceses that came for divorce ministry training. This year, the Holy Spirit has just taken this all to a whole new level. And so I would just encourage people, if you're going through separation or divorce or marital strife, get help, reach out. Your story isn't over. You belong in the church. You're a sinner. I'm a sinner. We belong in the church. That's what the church is for. And if you're on a parish staff, or if you're a priest or a bishop, I would just say, let's work together to create an effective pastoral pathway for these fractured families to build on what you are already doing. But we have so many resources that we've developed here that make it easy for the parish. They don't have to do much. They don't have to teach. They don't have to develop a program or develop content. They can just offer the space, help get the word out, and have this vetted, faithful, and effective program to help heal their people.
Have you been able to get this to the USCCB to do this maybe on an even more national level?
I'm working on it. Working on it. I do let them know what's going on, and it takes time. And they have so much going on, and I have such compassion for pastors and pastoral staff. They are asked to do so much. And that's why I've wanted to remove an obstacle of, we don't want to add one more thing to their plate. What we want to do is actually assist them. And it's up to the laity to do divorce ministry. It's up to the clergy to commission and approve and encourage. But it's up to the laity to do the heavy lifting and to be there and walking hand in hand with people. The clergy does not have the bandwidth. We need them. We love them and appreciate them. But I believe that it's the laity that has to step up here. And, 125 people did say, we want to learn more and we want to serve. And many people just haven't had a venue to be able to do that, and now they do.
Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left. I do want to remind folks about the event coming up and how they can sign up for the event which begins on September 3rd. So tell us about it. I want to wrap up with that to give you a little bit another plug. And by the way, if you go on the website, Carolyn's website, aboundingjoyministries.com, you can see all the different partnerships with various dioceses around the country: Galveston, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Boston, Charleston, Charlotte, Cleveland, Amarillo, Madison, St. Petersburg. So you can see that she follows church teaching to the T. Okay, so September 3rd. Yeah. What's happening?
And my apologies to those dioceses who weren't mentioned but are included.
Yeah, no, they're on the list, but it's on your website. Springfield is in there, Palm Beach, Norwich, Sacramento, and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are more even that need updating. But September 3rd, Build a New Life Workshop, which is a support and healing intensive. It's for those before, during, and after divorce. It gives you an incredible foundation of truth based in the Catholic faith. We process emotions. It's very healing. The average person comes in with a pain level of 8 of 10 and leaves 12 weeks later at about a 3 of 10 on average. It has been called the gold standard in Catholic divorce ministry. It's been called A Masterclass in Restoration. And I also have a info session that we just did where alumni came and shared their transformational experiences. But I would just say to people who are struggling, you know, you belong, you are loved, your story is not over, and there is healing. So do yourself a favor, you and your children a favor, and receive the healing that I didn't have and that I deeply desired, a program like this. So we would welcome you.
Carolyn, there's so much confusion. We didn't get a chance to even talk about this. There's so much information, wonderful information you share. There's so much confusion in terms of a divorced person in the church, annulments, the process. We'd love to have you back on again. You're a great guest. God bless your work. Really appreciate what you do. Again, for all the details, go to this website, aboundingjoyministry.com. We'll be right back. Let you know what's coming up at a Wednesday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Stay tuned. Wow. Richard and I always are amazed at how quickly time flies. We have such wonderful guests, and we hope that you appreciate the hard work that our team back in Irondale puts into these shows every single day. We do our best to keep you connected to what's happening in the world. All right? We are in the world, not of the world. That's why we cover these tough topics. Okay? We need to know how to navigate. And I thought the analogy that Carolyn gave us of walking through a minefield. Actually, the Lord gave it to her, and she shared it with us. Walking through a minefield as she was going through this horrible process of a divorce and the difficulties and the challenges that they face with annulments, because it's a long process. But anyone who's ever gone through an annulment, I've done a lot of interviews on this in my work on marriage ministry, they find it very, very therapeutic that the writing down, it's all written, canon law. I've also learned this going through a diaconate with my husband, that canon law is written. Everything is in writing. And it clarifies, it solidifies, and it's a very helpful process. And there's so much confusion about what the church says about those who have suffered the pain of divorce or annulment, so much confusion about the annulment process. So that's why this ministry that she's doing is so crucial. aboundingjoyministries.com. You can check it out. All right, coming up tomorrow, we have thrown out the call for all kinds of different interviews, and that's what we do here every day. We look at what's happening in the news, and we say, okay, this would make an interesting story. How does it apply to the Catholic faith, or this story, or that story? So we've got some pending, but we do have, of course, Joan Lewis from Rome. And we're going to learn more about the friendship between St. Clare and St. Francis for Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. Have a great Tuesday. God love you. Talk to you tomorrow on a Wednesday. Ciao, ciao.